Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. Most of you know a little bit about my story, and that's probably enough. So I'm not going to go into that, and time is precious. In fact, it is our most precious thing. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share a very personal story that involved my time in the military, and a time where I was my most vulnerable. So in doing so, I hope I can build some trust and rapport with each of you in this room. And in doing so, I can show you the mistakes that I made and the implications that that had on other people, myself included. Good leaders don't tell you how good they are. They explain how bad they were. And they do it in the interests of other people's professional and personal development. It is very difficult to do, and it doesn't get easier with time. So I'm standing in front of you today as one authentic individual to another to share my story. This story goes back to 2011 when I was in Afghanistan. I worked out of a forward operating base in an area known as Darawud, and I operated out of this base called FOB Hadrian. And my job in that environment was to act as what was called the quick reaction force. I was the jack of all trades. I had a number of vehicles and I had 30 soldiers in my command, and I was 22 years old. And I would run all over this area doing random things as the environment dictated, and I would try and help our fellow allies throughout that period in time. In this valley over to the right-hand side of the PowerPoint presentation, I spent a lot of my time fighting. I spent day after day fighting in very large-scale battles. Up in the north, I did a lot of patrols with ANA, trying to teach them to be better at what they could do, and therefore try and help them to take ownership of their own country. But on one afternoon with failing weather and a snowmelt, I got a call at the very last minute. And I was in my bed in FOB Hadrian, and I got told that up to the north, one of our American platoons had attempted to cross the river. And in doing so, one of their vehicles had been tipped over because of the large amount of water that had come from the snowmelt from the north. The so what is I got a short message that said, a vehicle's tipped, people are probably hurt. And with that as my information, I rallied my vehicles and whatever men I could get in a very short amount of time, and I then proceeded to put them in the vehicles. At the last minute, the officer commanding of that company, so the actual boss of that group of platoons, jumped in the vehicle and kicked one of my guys out at the last second. He's the boss, so he does what he wants. And off we went. We zoomed all the way from FOB Hadrian as fast as we could on a trip that would normally take us 90 minutes. We did it in 14. And the reason why it would normally take 90 minutes is because the road was riddled with bombs. We just gunned it because we knew our mates were in trouble and we knew we had to do a thing. We didn't know what that thing was yet, but we knew something had to be done. So we arrive, and what you see here is a Google Maps three-dimensional image of the area when it's at its absolute lowest in the water. And what you can see, if you look both on left and right-hand side of the river, is a big rocky bed. During snowmelt, that's what's covered. It's actually 3 times larger in width. So we jump in the car, we've got the wind rushing in our face, we're hammering along, there's 3 vehicles, a whole bunch of people trying to figure out what's going on, who's hurt, who's alive, what resources we have, what's going on, and it's getting dark very, very quickly. So we arrive, and we see lights, and we see chaos, and we see people trying to come up with plans. We see people with their shirts off and their boots off, Americans trying to swim out to this vehicle very unsuccessfully. I walk up to the platoon commander on the ground, someone I did not have a lot of respect for because I thought he was an incompetent individual, and to this day I still do. And I said, "What's going on? What's happened? How can we help?" And he was useless to me. He couldn't talk. He couldn't communicate what the situation was. And so I wrote him off, and I went to the sergeant, who was his second in command for intensive purposes. And the sergeant explained that none of the Americans knew how to swim. They're not an army that trains their people to swim, and in fact, it's a skill that is not resourced and is not trained as part of their force. It is in the Australian Army to a larger extent, but still frowned upon in most areas. So we had this group of people basically watching a vehicle on its side with people inside the vehicle presumably drowning. One of the gentlemen had popped out of the vehicle as it had rolled, which was the medic, and he had kind of gone out the little hole at the top of the roof and got sucked down the river and made it to safety. But the other 4 people were still in that car. Where at this point we had to start making some assumptions about people, whether they'd be alive or dead. If they're alive, then we're trying to save them. If they're dead, we're trying to recover them. Either way, something's got to happen. If we have to recover them, we can slow this right out. We can extend this over a couple of days. We can flood the area with resources and equipment and people, and we can protect that area and we can get the bodies out. We can do it very safely, all things considered. But we made the guess that people were alive. They're drowning, real time, and they're about 150 metres in front of us. So you've got to make a decision, right? You're the leader on the ground. The other platoon commander, who's arguably responsible for this, is a write-off. Sergeant's running around like a headless chook trying to figure out what's going on. What are you going to do? So I made a decision, and my logic was this. I would never ask someone to do something I wouldn't be willing to do myself. The second thing I ran through was, how could I look the parents in the face if one of these soldiers drowned? And it turns out that they're already dead in the vehicle anyway. How could I have that discussion and say, I risked your son's life to swim out to this vehicle, and everyone was already dead in the vehicle anyway. So we lost another life or 2 lives unnecessarily. I don't have that in me to do that. That's not in my values to be able to achieve that discussion successfully. So I said to my sergeant, who was 6'7", 120 kilo, bear-looking individual, and also amazing swimmer, I'm going to propose that we do it. And we leave the section that we brought in security with a section commander, and that person can control the security on the ground. And we as the headquarters, as the leadership, we're going to get those bodies out, and we're going to make it work. And we're going to protect our soldiers from having to do this very crappy task. So we did. We stripped down, we walked up the river to the north, under the logic that if we moved up to the north, we could swim using the current to our advantage to try and hit this vehicle. But in the back of my mind, I had to keep telling myself, Dave, you're an absolutely terrible swimmer. Terrible. I was known for it. They always used to joke about it when I was in the army about being a barbecue plate, because I was always the guy drowning in the pool. But again, you wouldn't ask someone to do something you wouldn't do yourself. So my sergeant, myself, and the OC at the last second went up. The OC got a bit ambitious and he dove in the water about 100 metres ahead of the vehicle. Gone, just disappeared into the night. And this is snow melt, so it's very, very cold. And he's just gone. There was no light, he's just disappeared. And we're like, damn, he's gone. One way or another, someone just got shot down a chute and they're gone. And it was so quick. I tried to keep pushing up a bit further up the river, because I said, hey, look, I know I'm a terrible swimmer. I'm going to need all the time in the world to try and hit the top of this vehicle. And I didn't have boots on. My sergeant was smart enough, he kept his boots on, but he was a stronger swimmer. And the rocks that we were walking on were very slimy, very cold, round, slimy rocks. And I was about half the way of where I wanted to be before I jumped into the water, and I slipped. And I just got sucked into the river and gone. And I proceeded to drown. I really, really drowned. It was terrible. I had water in my lungs, it was in my eyes. I hit a rock halfway through, and I just got fed in the face, and I was very disorientated, and it was a very terrible time for me. And I remember it very vividly. Needless to say, I was like, hey, you're in this now, you're committed, turn, swim, have a crack. And I'm trying to kind of guess, where I was in relation to this vehicle in the river, and needless to say, I finally saw a glimpse of what was the vehicle. And what I managed to grab was this little strap that had attached to the back of the vehicle, and I just managed to grab it instinctively. And I held onto it, and I swung around to the back of the vehicle, and I managed to just, pure adrenaline, pull myself up and onto the vehicle, which was on its side at this point in time. And then I started looking for the OC. So where is he? I'm looking around, looking down the river. I can't see him anywhere. And what I saw was a foot. And he had had a similar thing happen to him. And his foot had been caught by a hook on a cargo net on the vehicle as well. And he was actually underwater with just his foot out of so he was drowning as well. So there I am, naked, butt naked, trying to pull this guy up out of the water. I eventually get him out, I get his head up, he's blue as, and we start trying to pull him up. Robbie Rookley, like a missile, just hits the back of the vehicle, straight on, pure in control, great swimmer, just making everyone else look crap. Anyway, so he climbs up and we managed to yank him out. And we spent the next 4 hours trying to pull these dead bodies out of the vehicle. It took us 2 hours just to get into the vehicle because it had caused a vacuum. And we were using weapons and all sorts of bits of metal to try and reef open these doors and get these bodies out. And to get the bodies out, we had to duck dive over and over and over and over again into this vehicle in the freezing cold water for hours and hours, trying to get him out. We finally get him out, and then we start, I look to the bank, and I see what looks like maybe 30 Taliban-looking soldier types that I've come to know very, very well. And some of them I actually knew their faces. And they weren't there to hurt me. They were actually there to help me. They brought a rope, they brought lights, and they helped us get those bodies onto the far side of the river, which ironically is where I had no protection at all. All my soldiers were on the other side. It was almost like the east side and the west side. We're on the west side now, right? So this is badlands for us, but great for them. And in a time when I was most vulnerable, they helped us. Finally organised with some crazy arm waving, and we got the helicopters to come pick up the bodies, and eventually we got out of that situation. I got back to the base, and I was obviously unable to sleep. The next night, I was unable to sleep. And the next night, I was unable to sleep. And just prior to this, we had done 2 days of combat operations and fighting anyway, so I hadn't really had a lot of sleep there either. And the reason why I was unable to sleep was I just kept having flashbacks about drowning. I hated drowning anyway, let alone in ice water, let alone did I make the right decision, let alone what are my soldiers thinking of me, add on. So what transcribed? I get to day 3, I finally have to write my report about what happened, and I'm sitting there in the room and I'm typing up this report, and my corporal comes up to me, the one that I left there to maintain security while all this was happening. And he randomly dropped in conversation, "I think you did that for a medal." This is 9.5 months into a combat operation. We have gone shoulder to shoulder, we've been through rooms, we've been blown up, we've shot people, we've been involved in some very intensive stuff. Someone I look at as my brother going, "I reckon you did that for a medal." And it cut me to my core. It absolutely cut me to the center of my being. Because No good officer does anything for a medal. They do it for their men. And they do it for their soldiers. And they do it for their staff. They do it for the right reason. And I thought I was doing this for the right reason. And I thought they would understand that I tried to do this so some of them didn't have to. They wouldn't have to be the ones pulling out dead bodies. They wouldn't be the ones having to try and explain to parents if things went wrong. They wouldn't have to be that person. And I thought I was doing something very selfless, and I thought I was doing the right thing. And yet he said this to me, and it cut me to my very being. My identity was a platoon commander at the time, and a platoon commander that does things for medals is frowned upon in the army. As it turns out, I thought about this for many years, and it actually shaped the way that I acted on the ground for the rest of my job in the army. I was always worried about what my soldiers thought of me. I always worried about, was it just his opinion? Was it the opinion of the team? Was it the group? I never bothered to validate. I should have. And time went on, and I finally got back in contact with this guy, and I said, "Why did you say that? Did you mean it?" And he goes, "Said what?" He didn't even remember the conversation. For him, it was a nothing. For me, it was everything. And so I say to you, the context in our current world and in every environment we work in is people are not their behaviours. People are not their behaviours. What he did to me hurt me at a deeply personal level, and I still carry a legacy of that today. But for him, it was nothing. His behaviour was dictated on a fact that I had at no time explained the context of my decisions. He didn't understand why I had done that, and for him, in the absence of context, he had rationalised his own. He didn't know why I had decided to randomly jump in the river and do stupid things to try and get dead bodies out. He didn't know that I had made an assumption that those bodies were alive and we were trying to save them, not recover them. So in the absence of context, people will rationalise their own. You need, as leaders, to provide context for your decisions. And that context should exist in the how and the why. If you have not explained both of those things, you have missed an opportunity to create followership in your teams. And it's fleeting sometimes. The second thing is, as leaders, we need to make decisions. And sometimes we need to make those decisions in the absence of all the information. You know, there's the famous saying, an 80% in time is better than 100% too late. I absolutely believe in that. But context is everything. With context comes clarity. So I say to you, yes, make those decisions, but have you extended that extra 10 seconds in order to explain the how and the why, in order to build the clarity and the context for your staff? Because I told him, I said, "Mate, this cut me to my core. Do you understand why I did it?" And I explained. And when I told him, he goes, "Yeah, it makes perfect sense." Just gone. Yeah, it makes sense now you say it like that. I get it. Context. I had locked myself away for 3 days and they thought I was hiding. And I guess to some extent I was. But I was hiding, trying to get some sleep. I was trying to get back in the game so I was actually effective as a commander for these guys. And what they saw was me having done something stupid to get medals and then hiding away so I don't have to face them. That was the context that they built, or he built. So I say to you, engage with your staff and communicate effectively. And the final point which Pete raised as well is you are not your position. You're not your position, but you are your values. This cut me to my core because I attributed my success as being a platoon commander that was respected. Not a leader that was respected, but a platoon commander. Is a big difference. And what it means, you know, look at our current environmental context. We have coronavirus, we've got people changing jobs and roles, businesses are evolving by the second. The fact we're doing a live stream is testament to that, because 4 days ago that wasn't a reality for us. So we're moving very, very quickly. But people are not their positions. Your positions are going to change around. But you as a person, no. You need to know what your values are, your definitions of those values, and you need to subscribe to them and align yourself to other people with similar values. And this is what happens when you don't. And it happens very quickly. So that's one of my stories, and I hope in telling you that you can take something away. And if that one thing is always provide the context. The next story, and now I want this particular slide to make you feel like you want to vomit. Because when we finally left Defence, Jono and I, we worked in a senior project manager role, rolling out what was called an enterprise resource planner. A terrible, terrible project with complexity like the world has never seen. It's, to provide the context, think of one business that owns 7 businesses, as well as 2 non-for-profit residential and community care style businesses. So we've got 9 all up. They all have been purchased at different times by different people in different ways, and none of their systems talk in any way at all. There's no central understanding of what our reality was from a financial perspective, from any of our processes, from any of the projects, change management, contracts, the list goes on. And the idea was we'll bring in one suite of software that would take over all this complexity and lack of integrations, and it will make life great for us. And we were very fortunate to be sponsored in that transition from Defence, and for that, we will forever be eternally thankful. And this was an opportunity to really test all the leadership skills that we had subscribed to over the years, and this really did test us. But what I would say is, and at the top of the screen you'll see never assume. We came in super excited, and we made some assumptions. And one of those assumptions was that everyone's on board. Everyone's on board, because you came from a culture where you get told to do the thing and everyone does the thing. Maybe with slight variations, but by and large everyone does the thing, right? We might not like it, but we understand it and we go and do it. In a world where that is not the case, it's very disarming if you walk in with the assumption and then you get blindsided. And the way that took form was in our first board meeting where we presented our plan for the project. And we had just talked with one of the executives for no less than 30 minutes and had alignment, and we were ready to go. And we walked into this board meeting and he had all the information he needed, and he goes, "Yep, I'm going to support you guys, good work, in you go." And we walked in and we got absolutely blindsided with the complete opposite. He had just said one thing and he had done another, and it completely caught us off guard. So Jono and I, we go back afterwards and we're like, geez, what happened there? Was not expecting that, right? We thought, everyone was on board. We're trying to align to the strategy. We're trying to do the right thing. What was that? I've never seen that before. This is foreign to us. So, and we'd done the right thing. We'd preloaded this person. We had brought them on the journey. We had tried to shape the decision. We'd done all the right things. We'd done all the stakeholder engagement you could imagine. And we still got blindsided. People's values misaligned with our own. And that's how that manifested. So the next time we went in, and there's one lady in the room that can attest to this, we went in and we did the exact opposite thing. We stood in front of the board and we told them in graphic detail how we had personally let them down, and this is what that looked like. We'd missed an opportunity that had cost them $36,000 on the project. We had to make a decision which pushed it back a month, which was on that time was $124,000 a month. We had missed an opportunity to onboard some staff that now we're going to have to get consultants in to cover that gap. That's going to be more expensive. The list went on. And I argue that any project this size has this list of problems, but whether you're truthful enough with yourself to admit it. And we were like, all right, well, there you go. There's all the knives on the table. That's us. And we now call it the 8th mile play. There's another story behind that I don't have time to explain. And it actually had the reverse effect. So the board went, well, we can actually trust these guys. Who in their right mind gets up in a corporate setting and tells everyone exactly, in graphic detail, how they let the remainder of the team down? No one does it. In our world, that was completely normal. But it completely disarmed the board. And not only that, we did that board meeting after board meeting after board meeting to the point where they wanted to promote us as the general manager of the businesses. We made jokes that you can't trust their judgment. I mean, we're telling you in graphic detail how we're terrible. But what I say to you is uncomfortable honesty is one of the most disarming things you'll ever experience. And that's what this day is. It's so disarming for someone to just tell you what the thing is. This is me. This is all I've got. I'm telling you with absolute authenticity, this is where we're at, you and I. And in a world where everyone's wearing a mask, the one who isn't is the one that stands out. So I say to you as leaders, take a leap out of our book and say to yourselves, I'm going to be an authentic leader and I will lead with uncomfortable honesty. Because there is nothing more powerful at this time than uncomfortable and raw honesty. The next thing I would say, and just to close off our experiences within the ERP, is change is everywhere. But don't assume people are on the journey with you unless you've invested time to bring them there. And I would say as a mistake from our end, we didn't do that. We didn't do it. And we paid a price for that we were forever chasing to try and close the gap. We never quite got there. And I still look back at that project and I go, if I invested more time in the stakeholder engagement and bringing people along for the change, what the possibilities could have been for this in the time that we were serving that project. Change management is not a joke. And in fact, it makes or breaks organisations. And that's why with the skills we've learnt today, we've created this company to help people on that journey and learn from our mistakes. That's all I have for you today. I thank you very much for your trust, and I hope in some way that we have a rapport that we can use in future time. And you know, from me and my team, it means a lot that you've served us and by coming today, and we can serve you in return by providing you with some lessons that otherwise you would not have had. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. I'm sure you'll agree it was a fascinating and compelling discussion about human behaviour and actually highlights some great skills that I've had the pleasure of being associated with in working with Jono and Dave. And would encourage any of you to have the opportunity to work with a veteran, that you'll be pleasantly surprised. So for those of you in the room that have worn a uniform, thank you for your service.